Hi, welcome back to Dwayne's Guitar Lessons. I'm instructor Dwayne Jenkins, and in today's video we're going to be continuing to talk about this book right here, Rock Guitar 101. And in my last videos I gave you a little bit of review about the book itself. This is a book that I wrote, and I got it in paperback copy, so I'm really happy about that. So what I'm doing is making some videos to kind of let you know what the book's about, in case you might be interested in purchasing it. And it's a starter book, okay, for somebody who's just getting started. It's Rock Guitar 101, and it kind of gives you just a few lessons on how to get started, what kind of tools you need, and what kind of things you need to get started with playing rock guitar, and then later on you can progress from there. But to me, one of the hardest things is getting started, okay? That's why I wrote this book, and that's why I want to do some videos to kind of give you a little insight to what the book's about and how you can get started, okay? So in our last video, we talked about lesson 1, getting your guitar, okay? So in lesson 1, it's the guitar and the amplifier. So I did a video on the guitar, and if you didn't see that, I'll leave you a link below. You can check that out, okay? The second part of lesson 1 is the amplifier. Okay, and the book's cool. It's got a little picture here of the amplifier, okay? And this is the kind of amplifier I would recommend that you start off with, is a Marshall. And the reason why is because Marshall was specifically designed to rock, okay? They didn't really have a rock amp before Marshall came along, okay? You had Fender and you had some other amps out there, but nothing like the Marshall, okay? The Marshall was the first amp that kind of broke up and gave you that distortion that they wanted. And it's kind of interesting. If you don't know about Marshall, I'll just give you a little story about it. Marshall was invented by Jim Marshall, and it's funny, he wasn't a guitar player, he was a drummer. And he was a professional drummer, and he taught drum lessons, and he had a drum store out in England. And some of his students were people like Mitch Mitchell of the Jimi Hendrix Experience, Keith Moon, I believe Keith Moon from The Who, took some lessons from him as well. And they would come into his shop to buy some drum stuff, and they would bring their guitar players with them, you know, playing in their band, and they started asking him, why don't you carry guitar stuff? Well, because he was a drummer, you know, so he could see that there was a demand for that, so he started carrying guitar products. And one of the students, one of the guitar players, young guitar player named Pete Townsend of The Who, he came in and asked him, you know, about trying to find an amp that it gave a little bit more of a raw sound. Well, there really wasn't one on the market, you know. So Jim Marshall, seeing that you know, this was something that people wanted, he decided to get together with some people. He got a couple engineers together, and they designed a Marshall amp, an amplifier that would give Pete Townsend this heavier edge, this kind of grittier edge that he wanted, okay? So they based it off the Fender, I believe it's the Fender Basement amp. They kind of modeled it off that. And they came up with the JTM, I think it was the JTM 45 back in 1962. And this was the amp that just kind of did it. And this amp was a hit, and it sold, and by the late 60s, it was dominating the industry. I mean, all the great guitar players have played through a Marshall. You know, Jimi Hendrix and Eric Clapton and Jimmy Page and Jeff Beck. You know, and then into the 70s, you had groups like bands like AC/DC. You know, and Boston and Leonard Skinner, and then it came to be that, you know, you plug a Gibson into a Marshall, that became the sound of rock. And so if you kind of go through all those rock bands of the 70s, you know, almost all those great bands, rock bands, plugged into a Marshall. You know, so if they were good enough for them, should be good enough for us, right? That's what I'm thinking. Okay, and then even to the 80s, you know, you look at all those 80s rock bands and those hair bands, you know, even just the heavy metal bands too, you know, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, Guns N' Roses, you know, Ozzy, all those bands, Marshall, okay? All the great guitar players, you know, Randy Rhoads, you know, Slash, Angus Young, you know, Joe Satriani, Zakk Wylde, Eddie Van Halen, you know, all those guys, Marshall. Okay, so you can't go wrong with Marshall. Marshall is a great rock amp, and we're going to take a look at it now. So let's take a look. Audio Jungle. Okay, so here's the amp that I'm talking about. It's a little Marshall MG10. In my opinion, I think this is a great little practice amp, okay? It's 10 watts, it's got 2 channels. Now, I'm not gonna go through actually how to work it. That's gonna be in our next lesson, okay? But this is the kind of amp I would highly recommend. Getting something like this, it's only 10 watts. This is actually my amplifier that I teach out of. this thing's all kind of beat up and stuff, you know. It's not that clean. I probably should have cleaned it up a little bit before doing this video. But anyway, this is what I use for teaching. And this little amp, I kid you not, I've probably taught a few thousand lessons in this amp, literally. Over the years, I've had this thing for almost 20 years. I think this was from the 90s, I think 2000, something like that. This amplifier is kind of, this model, the MG10, has been around a long time. And it's still around. The new version is a little different though. It's silver, and then this is a little different as well. I made a video a while back on how to get a good tone out of a starter amp, and I use the other model, the newer model, and I'll put that a link in the bottom if you'd like. It's got some good information there, but this is the kind of amp that I would highly recommend getting. Something like this. Get a Marshall. I mean, you can get PV and all that, but Marshall, okay, just check it out real quick here. You got your input. Okay, you got your clean knob here. You got only a few knobs, so it stays simple. I like that. Okay, you got a button here for your distortion. You got your overdrive, so the volume and the gain, that's what gives you overdrive. And then you have your EQ, and this is what gives you, you know, your tone, whether you have low tone or high tone, middle tone. Then you also have a direct line in. This is what's cool about this, is you can plug in your phone, you know, an iPod, an MP3 player, whatever, and listen to music and then play along to the song. That is just an awesome factor in amplifiers nowadays. I love that. That really helps out your learning, and we'll discuss that in future lessons. And then right here you have your headphone jack. And then of course the on and off knob here. But it's real simple, real basic, and I would highly recommend that when you're starting out, keep it just simple. Keep things simple. Nowadays, you got amps that have a lot of knobs and a lot of stuff in them, and that's okay, but sometimes that's just a little too distracting. I would recommend you just keep it simple with something like this, okay? Little 10 watt. You can also get a bigger one, the 15 watt or 30 watt, whatever you want. But this is a really cool little amp, and it's portable. You can just take it over with you to somebody's house if you jam with them or something. You know, great little Marshall amp, I think, for just getting started. Okay, and that's what we're talking about here, is just getting started. Okay? All right, so there we have it. What kind of amp to get? I would highly recommend getting something like that. Either the Marshall MG10 or the MG15, which is a 15 watt. And I wanted to read a little bit here about the book, what it says here and here. Okay, it says the Marshall MG10 is 10 watts of power. That's why it's got the 10. It has 2 channels and an EQ, and that's what I showed you in the video. Okay, and then it has the, you know, all the stuff for the, you know, you can plug your iPhone in it or your iPod and play along to songs, you know, and then get that little EQ button to shape your tone, okay? So you can either get that or you can get one that's a little bit bigger, but it doesn't really matter. Just, I would recommend just get a good amp. It's very important that you get the right amp, because rock is a certain sound, okay? If you don't have the right sound, it's not going to inspire you to want to play. And like I said, all the great guitar players played through Marshall. So if they, you know, played through it, there's got to be a reason why. And you got, and even nowadays, you know, it's 2018. Nowadays, you even got bands like, you know, guitar players like Slash. He plays through Marshall. I mean, you're talking a guy who could play through any amp he wants. He chooses Marshall. Angus Young, you know, any amp he wants, he chooses Marshall. Zakk Wylde chooses Marshall. Joe Satriani chooses Marshall. Okay, Slayer chooses Marshall. Okay, there's a reason why. All right, so get you a Marshall amp, and in our next lesson we're going to talk about how to get a good tone out of it. That's lesson 2, dialing in a good rock tone, and that's what we're going to talk about in our next lesson. Okay, so thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed the video lesson. I hope you got something out of it. I'll leave some links below on where you can get the amp, and I'll also leave some other amps too. Okay, I recommend the Marshall, but you know, there's other amps that are good too, like PV, and there's Fender, and there's some other ones, you know, Mesa Boogie and some other ones too. So I'll leave some links below in there, and you can check out those amps too, okay? But I highly recommend that you're getting started, get this book. It's a good starter book, and get you a nice Marshall amp. And I'll leave, like I said, I'll leave a link below for that guitar too. That was the other part of lesson 1, in case you might have missed that, okay? So watch that. You get you a good guitar, you get you a good guitar, you get you a good rock amp like a Marshall. You learn how to dial in a good rock tone, which we're going to talk about next. And I'm telling you, you will be on your way to being a great rock guitar player, all right? So thanks again for watching. Visit my website at DwaynesGuitarLessons.com and join my email guitar club, where I have a lot of great training tips that I'll send you through the email. And if you have any questions, you can contact me through there. And be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for future notifications. And until our next lesson, you, my friend, take care.